We've all long realized that China is a high-tech and advanced country. The launch of another ambitious megaproject here almost feels like no big deal to us anymore. China builds the longest bridges, its cities are home to towering skyscrapers, and bullet trains zip across endless landscapes. It seems this country always has a new way to show the world they think far ahead into the future, and here they go again pulling off a massive project, a gigantic water transfer system. At first glance it doesn't sound all that impressive since pipes and pumps aren't exactly groundbreaking these days, but as always China has taken it to the next level. They're planning to carry water hundreds of miles along man-made rivers that practically flow over the mountains. You don't have to be an expert to see it, the country has two parts that are totally different from each other. The first part is the southern one. Here the climate is mild and subtropical. Winters are short and the scenery stays gorgeous all year round. This kind of climate is a dream come true for a farmer or just someone who enjoys some warm weather. But the biggest perk of this part of the country is having water around. There's really a ton of it here, all thanks to the Yellow River and the Yangtze River. The Huanghe, or Yellow River, is one of the longest rivers in the world, stretching nearly 3,400 miles. It supplies water to about 12% of the country's population, irrigates 17% of its farmland, and provides for over 50 cities. This river is the true heart of China's millennia-old history, which is why it's often called the cradle of Chinese civilization. The waters of the Yellow River have given life not just to people but to a thriving aquaculture. For instance, pond after pond in the Xinjiang area is used to farm a local species of carp, and not far from Bansun they raise Chinese soft-shell turtles, a real treat for foodies. However, the real wonder unfolded just a bit farther south off the banks of the Yangtze River, which could easily outshine the Yellow River's accomplishments. It's not only the longest and most water-rich river in China, but in all of Eurasia. It ranks third worldwide for water volume and fourth for length, stretching an impressive 3,915 miles. When the Chinese came to these lands from the Huanghe Valley, they faced a new reality. The climate was even milder than where they'd been before, with plenty of rain, almost no droughts, and no frosts. This river became a true paradise for farmers. A whole new way of farming sprang up here, mostly revolving around growing rice. To give you an idea of just how rich the so-called southern region is, there are times when this precious resource gets so abundant it causes people to suffer. Typhoons and East Asian monsoons frequently hit these areas, leaving behind catastrophic flooding. On top of that, the rivers themselves regularly spill over their banks. The Yellow River carries so much silt and wood that over the years it creates a riverbed that towers several feet above the surrounding lands. This could have been an advantage, but it quickly turns into a nightmare when nature gets out of hand. Any overflow or breach in the dam leads to devastating floods. We're not just talking about water here. Imagine a flow of liquid mud crushing everything in its path, leaving no chance for homes, crops, or people. And let's not even talk about the massive floods caused by the Yangtze, which, as we've learned, is much more powerful than the Yellow River. They also tried to tackle the problem with well-designed dam systems, but after these projects were implemented the floods didn't subside. In the end, the green region may seem like paradise, but at times it turns into a place where simply being there is downright dangerous to life. True, all this excess water in the south, which sometimes becomes critical, still doesn't make the region less livable than the northern part. The situation there is totally different. Long, cold, and dry winters with temperatures that constantly drop below 32 degrees Fahrenheit. And if you think that in the summer everything's the other way around, well yes, but not in a better way. It's hot, humid, and sometimes exhaustingly stuffy. Spring and autumn, when you can still live more or less comfortably, pass by in the blink of an eye. The ecology of northern China may be simple, but it's incredibly vulnerable to droughts, which occur here regularly. You can clearly see the climate difference between parts of China on this map. The southern part is red or close to this color. The average temperature throughout the year is above 50 to 57 degrees Fahrenheit. Meanwhile, the northern part has an average yearly temperature close to 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Due to a combination of all sorts of factors, there's an enormous amount of sand in the north. For example, it's in this part of the country that you'll find the impassable Taklamakan, a harsh desert with shifting sands and, by the way, the largest of its kind. Don't forget about the Gobi, one of the largest deserts in the world, which is constantly expanding. For centuries, Mongolian herders have roamed these harsh steppes to graze their cattle on the tough, scrubby grasses that somehow survive in this unforgiving land. However, the Chinese somehow managed to survive here too. But if you thought that the whole northern part of China is covered in sand, think again. There are also mountain ranges that take up just as much space, and the land there is definitely not what you'd call friendly. As you'd expect, northern China faces a problem not typical for the south, a lack of water. The demand for water here far exceeds its supply. First of all, it's because there's not much rainfall in the northern part. It's clear that the southern part gets way more rain. The area looks darker. The rest of China struggles with this, and this isn't a matter for any specific month. This situation is typical throughout the whole year on average. And now we'll suddenly move to the capital of China, Beijing. Why? The thing is, the city suffers from a water shortage just like a village in Africa. For a long time Beijing got its water from aquifers, but at a certain point, due to dry periods, the underground reserves just stopped replenishing. On top of that, they were also heavily polluted due to rapid industrialization. Eventually there came a time when there was less than 26,400 gallons of water per capita within the city's administrative borders. This was 1/12 of the national average, 1/180th of the global average, and far below the internationally recognized level. A severe water shortage begins when there are less than 449,000 gallons per capita. In short, Beijing is a clear example of how serious the water problems are in northern China. Of course, the water crisis in northern China costs the country a lot. The economy loses about $35 billion every year because of water shortages. That's 2.5 times more than the average losses from flooding. It may seem like the problem is too difficult to solve radically, and coming up with something that would really change the situation is hard. The way things are, some places have conditions that allow people to live comfortably and use enough water, while others have to survive and constantly save every drop of this precious resource. However, don't forget that we're talking about a country of grand projects that constantly amaze the world. So at some point China wondered, what if the South just shared water with the North and balanced things out? In fact, people started thinking about it long before the current water crisis. When the Communist Party came to power in 1949, China entered a new era of industrial growth and centralized planning, and that's when one of the main issues, the huge gap in access to water between the South and the North, became obvious and almost top priority. It was during this period, in 1952, that Mao Zedong proposed an idea that could change the situation in the country. He said, "There's plenty of water in the South, not much water in the North. If at all possible, borrowing some water would be good." These words became the starting point for an ambitious project to transfer water from the South to the North. But Mao didn't live to see his plans come true. Though they started thinking about the project almost immediately, it was in development for a full 50 years and only existed on paper. The calculations took longer than expected. Until December 1979, the Ministry of Water Resources in China didn't have any project planning offices. Only by the 1990s, with the backing of some high-ranking officials, did the project finally come close to being realized. And so, in December 2002, they began building the Grand System. The project's goal was to pump an incredible 11.7 trillion gallons of fresh water every year to areas with shortages using 3 canals. These canals were supposed to stretch for thousands of miles, connecting the Yangtze and the Yellow River, as well as the Hai and Huai rivers. And the names? Well, they didn't bother coming up with anything fancy. There's the Eastern, Central, and Western Canal.